All right, so we're kind of at the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and get started. So first of all, welcome to everybody. So this session is the RQAP Credential GLP Study Group. So hope you should be attending this if you are planning on writing the GLP RQAP exam or just even thinking about it. Otherwise, if you're not one of those two categories, hopefully you are already RQAP GLP certified, in which case you are part of our panelists that will be providing support and helping to answer your questions and basically just get discussions going. So what we're going to do today, and this is sort of the schedule going forward. So there are 5 weeks. Actually, I am going to go ahead and let me just check if Lydia's on. And okay. So I am actually going to start recording it just because we did in the past record it, and it's always a good idea to record it. That way, if anybody misses a session, they can always. Okay. I'm not actually the host, though. Unfortunately, I can. Okay, I'm host. No, I do not have a key. Okay, so we will get started, and hopefully someone from headquarters will be able to join and start the recording. And
it says it's being recorded already.
Does it?
Yeah, I got a message saying, and then there's a thing at the top of the screen saying it's recording.
Okay, I'm not seeing that, so because I have a different view being sharing.
Oh
my
yeah, sure.
Over. Okay. All right, so that's great that it's recording. Perfect. Okay, so sorry about that interruption. So, so you'll see that we do have a 5-week scheduled. So it's going to, the sessions are going to be held every Tuesday at 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. The sessions will be recorded. We know obviously not everyone is necessarily available at the same time. And so what we've actually done is kind of, we're running it very similar to how we did last time. So in the spring, so in the fall of 2024. And basically, because we only have 5 weeks instead of 6, we truncated the last session to week 5 and 6. But basically, we've tackled the topics that come from the study guide from your RQAP candidate handbook. So if you don't know what that is, go to the SQA website under RQAP, and you will see a ton of resources. So even if you're just thinking about it, not necessarily planning on writing it, take a look at that. It's got a lot of great information about the exam, about the materials that are covered in the exam, and it also has the guide. So today's topic is going to be, hey, Lydia. So today's topic is going to be compliance management, scheduling and what to schedule, reporting and reporting, record keeping, what to record, documenting, and what to document. These are going to be the focus of the questions that we've kind of just come up with to get discussions, but this is a study group. If you have questions outside of these topics, you can ask anything. This is what we're here for. Now, this is not a training session. You're not here to just sit and passively receive information. You're here to act like a study group. Like think back to your school days and you had a test coming up. You'd have these study groups. It wouldn't be just someone dictating you. It's not the lecture, but it's the group of folks trying to get together, chat, share their information, make sure everyone's understanding things the same way. So the more you put into these sessions, the more you get out of. So at this point, I realize I've been talking for a few minutes now. By the way, my name is Sherry Lee Dawson. That's I always forget to introduce. So I will be the moderator for this session, but we have several of our panelists as well. So I didn't slot the panelists in on the slide, but panelists, if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hi, Deborah Randall Luback, San Antonio, Texas. I've been registered quality assurance professional in GLP since 2006. I'm kind of dating myself, and I love it. I love it. This is an incredibly special group, colleagues and friends, and I've learned from all of them. So they helped me sit for and take the exam successfully the first time. So welcome. I wish you all the best.
Great, thanks, Deb. Do we have any of our other individuals that are part of panel or moderators, even if you're technically not signed up as a panelist this week? Please go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Brendan Highland. I've been RQAP, I think, since 2011, and I'm in Canada. So I tend to work in both OECD and FDA GLPs, depending on who I'm doing work for.
Thanks, Brendan. So you will actually see that both Deb and Brendan are going to be moderators in the coming weeks. So you will see more of their face. I will be on most of those weeks as well. But I have a back-to-back meeting. So unfortunately I have to drop off earlier on the weeks that I'm not moderator. But we also have, are there any other panelists on? If not, we'll move on. So again, what we're going to cover in today's session is, so we're going to cover exam writing. Oh, I thought I had a slide that, okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about the logistics, some good to knows and helpful hints. So I will take a little bit longer to talk to this today, but going forward, it'll be the same information and we'll kind of just speed through a little bit just because we don't know if someone is, you know, they're open sessions. People are able to join whatever sessions they want, all or only some. It's completely up to you. But we don't want to waste too much of the time talking about the logistics, but these are some great helpful hints. So we'll jump right into them. So the exam itself is 165 multiple choice questions and 15 of them are not scored. So they do run an additional 15 questions just to see how they sit and whether they will be considered or if they've been, or if they're questions that they've been having, that they've been seeing like a significant number of individuals not necessarily getting it right. They're just questions that they want to test to make sure if it should remain in the test, officially become a test question or not. So you're given 3.5 hours, which gives you about 1.25, so 1.25 minutes per question. So for extra cost, special testing for candidates who English is not their first language is available. If English is not your first language, I do recommend you do take that option if you're comfortable with that. Because it's a very long test. It really is. There's some of them are quite wordy and you don't want to waste time trying to translate some of the content of the question to yourself. There's no shame in writing it in your own language. It's super important that you feel comfortable when you're writing exam. You don't want to take that extra time or to like having to try and translate stuff. The practice exam is now free, so you can get that access on the SQA website. All of that information, we can send that to you, but check out the SQA and go to the RQAP information. It's all there. If you haven't taken the exam, I do encourage you to take it just to get a sense of what the exam is like and get refreshing. If it's been a while since you've been in school taking exams, it's always nice to have a quick check. Now those questions are not in the exam, have not been in the exam. But they're types of questions. Now, we've had a lot of feedback that the practice exam questions are much simpler than the ones actually that land in the exam. So this is more just a practice to sort of test some of your knowledge and get used to taking an exam, and not so much necessarily if you got 100% on your practice exam, it doesn't guarantee that you're getting 100% in the actual exam. The exam covers both the FDA GLPs, EPA GLPs, OECD principles of GLPs, and 21 CFR Part 11. So it's all encompassing. Important information, so helpful hints. Read through all suggested material in the candidate handbook. I can show you where to access that if you're not sure where to get it. Know the regulations. The preambles for the various FDA and EPA stuff will help understand the expected interpretation of the applicable regulations. Answer the questions based on the most conservative approach to what the regulations indicate. And this, and as you see, it's bolded, this may differ from what you do at your company. Now, we all know that the regulations have a lot of gray in there, and how companies interpret or modify stuff to meet their requirement. Look at it from like, look at the regulations as if you were like black and white. It's this or that. There's no gray. And that's how you should approach the quiz questions, even if it's different. And I say this going back the first time I wrote it. So I wrote it once, I passed, I had it for 3 years, then I lost it because I didn't do the enough training to maintain it. And then I rewrote it again. But the first time I wrote it, I was like, I don't understand. And every time my company was talking about an archiving thing, I'm like, but we need to do this. And they said, for those of you who are taking the exam, this is not necessarily the right answer to things, but, and this goes back to years and years ago. And it wasn't wrong, it was a gray area. So again, you always take the strictest interpretation. There's a lot of questions and not a lot of time. Read through the question carefully. And if a question looks really long or complicated, skip it. You can actually mark it and come back to it later. It's better to skip a handful of questions and get through 95% of it versus wasting 5, 10, 20 minutes on one that you really struggle on and then not finishing a good 10%. It really is a numbers game in terms of the exam. Obviously, you need to know your material, but it is a numbers game. Watch your time. After the first hour, you should be through 50 to 55 questions. So you got to pace yourself. And if you're unsure, guess. You're not penalized for a wrong answer. A wrong answer is the same as no answer. So it's better to have an answer in there, even if it's either A or B, you can't remember. I can't figure it out. Mark it. You can always you can also tag that one and come back to it later if you have more time and you want to debate it more in your head. Watch for keywords. These will help you assess which regulations you should be answering. Now, obviously, FDA, EPA, and OECD GLPs are very similar, but there are some subtle differences. So you definitely want to keep your eye on any terms that can help direct you to which regulations the question is being based on. So if you're talking protocol, that's going to be FDA or EPA versus study plan, which is the term in OECD. Control article, which is FDA, reference article, which is EPA, and reference item in OECD. Reference to pesticides would be EPA, multi-site is OECD, etc. Apply logic. Most questions have 2 answers that are clearly incorrect. So majority of the questions, it will be down between 2 different answers, and then that's where your studying and knowledge will apply. There's a good, usually 1 to 2 that are, yeah, that's not at all applicable. All right, so now we're going to dive into the meat and potatoes of today's session. So this is the content. So I'm going to go through quickly. This is the content. Hold on, let me. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just quickly open it. Sorry, I have many screens open, so I don't know if my Explorer is opening. Okay. So the image that I'm displaying it is the SQA website. Everyone can see that? Okay. All right, so from your SQA website, you're going to go to education and career, and then you've got the RQAP credential. And you can just click on there. And there's a whole bunch of information. And then you go to candidate resources. So if you go to candidate resources, they've got the handbook. This is what I keep talking about, the RQAP handbook. Definitely want to take a look, read through that. Then they also have links to your study reference, exam content outline, and previous presentations on the RQAP, and then the practice exam. So everything is all accessible from your SQA website. Sorry, I did want to take a minute just to show show that to you. So within the candidate handbook, it is a wonderful document that the group has created. So all the information I've told you today in terms about the exam, so the information comes from here, 165 questions, 15 will not be scored. Applications, refund eligibility, all that fun stuff. If you, sorry, if I'm not making you dizzy, but more information, preparation, and then they do have a detailed content outline. So this is going to cover the content and which percentage, how much of the exam is dedicated to that content. So today we are covering our compliance management. So I'm going to quickly go through some of that content, and then we're going to go ahead and get started with some quiz questions, actually. Okay. So, all right, let me. All right. So scheduling, the type of audits that one would schedule are protocol, critical phase inspections, raw data and supporting documentation audits, draft interim and or final reports, and facility and support area inspections. Don't forget about follow-up. Additionally, there may be sponsor and regulatory audits to manage. The scheduling is a management tool for controlling the flow of work in the QA. Scheduling provides a mechanism for identifying and tracking, oops, sorry about that typo, status of tasks, and that covers 10% of the exam. A report and or keep records on, so the GLP compliance status of studies, facilities, systems, and processes, protocol and SOP deviations, and the master schedule. QA reports audits to management, study director, and other key individuals, and ensure any findings impacting study integrity are immediately reported. That's and documenting what to ensure documentation of key aspects, inspection and audit results, status of recommended corrective actions, training and qualification of QA personnel, records of regulatory and sponsor client inspection activities, findings and responses. So these are the different aspects. So this is 10% of the exam for scheduling, 10% on reporting and record keeping, and 9% on documenting. So those are the topics that we're focusing our questions on today. But again, this is a study group. If you have other questions outside of that, feel free to put it in the chat, raise up your hand, and we can unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question. Again, the more you put into these sessions, the more you get out. It's not just to sit and listen to what we have to say and take a few notes. It's really not a training session. It's a discussion. You can certainly hopefully walk away with some notes and things to consider and interpret, but yeah. So first, I want to open the floor to any specific questions any of our attendees might have. So if you have any, please feel free to put it in the chat, or if you want to, have a question, or if you want to speak, you can feel free to raise your hand, and you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question. So are there any questions at this time? I'm not seeing any. All right. So since there's no questions, we're going to move into some poll questions. So I'm actually going to have Lydia send out a poll. So these are open-ended questions. They're not multiple choice. So it's not exactly like the exam, but they are some questions on the topics of scheduling, reporting, etc. And so if you all can take a few minutes to think about, put an answer in. It's anonymous. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. It's just to give us content to discuss, because you're going to see, especially since this is the first session, people are very shy and not sure what to expect or what to ask. So this is just to get some dialogue and questions happening. Okay, so there's the first poll question. So if everyone could. Okay, I hear someone talking. I don't know if someone's asking a question. I just.
I can't hear her. Yeah,
Might just be someone's background.
okay.
Yeah, if someone does have a question, we can't quite hear you. For those of you who are on though, can you actually put in a response? I can't actually, I can read the question, but I don't have a. Okay, so we got 4 responses. All right, some responses coming in. I'll give you guys another minute or so, or 2, and then we'll look at it. So in the meantime, the first question actually is, when QA schedules their audits on a GLP study, what is the biggest difference for them to consider if a study is claiming compliance to OECD principles of GLP versus FDA GLPs?
I'm not
Are we-
familiar with OECD, so I have no idea.
That's okay. And you know what? You can put that, not sure about OECD, or you can put, that's a perfectly valid thing. And especially if you still haven't quite started studying or still aren't necessarily writing it this spring. So you're just kind of feeling what's this exam about. You can put in the information about the regulations you are familiar with. So if you don't know the difference, then think of it like, answer the question in terms of, well, I know the FDA's, so this is what I would be doing when I'm scheduling my inspections on a study. Thank you. That was a great question or comment. Thank you.
As long as John doesn't keep adding more features to this, I think we're fine.
Okay, someone is unmuted and coming. There's some talking coming through, and I don't really have an issue with that. It's just in case you're saying anything confidential. Just want to make sure you're not sharing some trade secrets in your little or having a private conversation that you don't realize you're unmuted for. All right, are there any answers? I'm only seeing 4, so I'll give you like 1 more minute and then we'll just close it and look at those answers. And again, the more, okay, perfect. Okay, so the answers that we received, sorry, I'm partially blind. It's really tiny. Okay. Sorry, Linda, can you just make the response, make it a little bit larger in font size or zoom size? That's possible. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, so we've got review of study plan versus protocol. Regulatory requirements. US doesn't claim OECD, they follow FDA. So when scheduling, one would need to follow FDA. And OECD allows for process audits. All right, so thank you for all who responded. I will get to, sorry, I'm trying to man both the chat and the presentation. Okay, so what I had, oh, sorry, multiple screens here. Okay, so when QA schedules their audits on a GLP study, what is the biggest difference for them to consider if the study is claiming compliance to OECD principles versus versus FDA GLPs. So in OECD, so someone did have the answer that I came up with was in OECD, if activities are routine, a study-specific audit is not required. So there is the allowance for process audits to cover the study, whereas under FDA and EPA, every study must be audited. Okay, so that's one of those differences between FDA and OECD. So Lydia, if you want to launch the second question, and I do see there's other questions in the chat that I will get to as people start responding to the second one. Okay, so we have, is there any reference material provide a detailed comparison of the 3 guidances of GLP, GCP, and GMP? None that I am aware of, but we do have for GLP, because GLP, GCP, and GMP are all significantly different regulations. So you're comparing an apple, a grapefruit, and a watermelon. Whereas there is a comparison document for the OECD, GLPs, EPA, and FDA. And that's a document that you definitely want to utilize. And that is one of the documents that is a reference material in the resource page. So you definitely want to check out the study references, and there is a document that that shows all 3 differences, and that's going to certainly be helpful to highlight the differences. But no, to my knowledge, I don't think there would be anything comparing, because they're 3 very different regulations for 3 very different processes. Ellen had, if there's a question with multiple correct answers, do we want to answer with the best answer or what we should do first? Example, you find someone doesn't have training for a task during an audit, what do you do? Answers might be stop them from doing testing immediately and notify their manager, or maybe submit a finding. That's a great question. So absolutely, that's where the advice came from in terms of don't go by what you necessarily do at your facility, but go by what the regulations themselves highlight. So you would have to go with the best answer based on the regulations, not what necessarily you would do. So usually, like, stop them from doing testing, notify their manager, submit a finding. I bet you the 4th answer there is notify the study director. So and assuming this is a question from FDA, the FDA requirements primarily are QA reports citations to the study director. So that would be your first course of action. Now, while you're actually an auditor in the room, we all know if you're about to see someone do something wrong, you're going to be like, hold up, don't do that. Or your labeling's wrong, or you're about to misdose the animal, don't do it. We all do that. We all know that's the reality. But from the regulations, our responsibility is to stay independent and report our findings to the study director. So it would be a notify the study director immediately. But yes, that is a great question. My question is related to your response to the first question. For FDA, GLP, EPA studies, is it acceptable to move from in-phase audits to process audits due to low risk findings? Or is this approach only acceptable for clinical studies? So FDA and EPA do not prohibit process-based audits, but they do require study-specific audits. So what that would mean is each study still must be audited at a frequency to the FDA regulations will at a frequency to ensure, I work more with the FDA, with the OECD regulations, so I don't have the exact wording, and I'm just checking my little handy regs for the QA section. Inspect each non-clinical laboratory study at intervals adequate to assure the integrity of the study and maintain written and properly signed records of each periodic inspection showing the date of the inspection and all the information. So FDA and EPA GLPs do not prohibit process-based audits, but you still must be doing a study-based inspection. Under OECD, they actually have a stipulation that a study does not necessarily need a study-based inspection if all the activities on it are considered process-based. So that's one of the biggest difference from a QA perspective of OECD versus FDA, EPA studies. So I hope that answered your question. And for those of you who I'm answering your questions, if it's not quite what you were looking for, then please respond further. Oh, all right. So let's go to our second. Okay, so working as a QA auditor at a test site, who should the QA audit be sent to? So we've got PI, test site management, and then issued to the study director and testing facility management. All right, that's a great response. PI, SD, TFM, TSM, excellent. Study director, test facility management, lead QA, test site management. That one's close. Study director, TFM, TSM, and principal investigator. Study director and TFM, study director, test site management, QA management. All right, there's a lot of great responses. I haven't seen one yet that's everything. I think some of, okay, so the study director, the lead QA, study director, test site. All right, so that last guest person was to lead QA. So that's the QA at the testing facility. Then we have the study director, we have the principal investigator, the test site management, and test facility management. So 5 individuals in theory we should be sending those questions, those audit reports to. This of course is an OECD question. It falls under our OECD principle, OECD document 13. Application of the OECD principles to organization and management of multi-site studies. So it's that's the one that drives it. So when you're the auditor at the test site, the PI is the dedicated person responsible for that phase, and the test site management. Now, there may not be test site management. Sometimes test facility management can take that responsibility, but assuming there is, test site management. Then of course, all audits always have to go to the study director and testing facility management and lead QA, because the lead QA and test site QA also need to liaise, and lead QA need to be aware of the findings and stuff that they're seeing on test sites, so they can ensure that GLP compliance and the QA responsibilities at the test site are occurring. So whoever put that response in, great job. So
There's a comment, Shirley.
yeah. The lead QA may not necessarily reside at the test facility. Absolutely. The lead QA may not reside at the test facility. There are instances where a test facility may not have their own independent QA, so they may hire consulting, but there would still be a contact. There should be a contact in the protocol or study plan so that there is someone that you can communicate with. Yes, thank you. That does, that's great. And does that apply to final report audits as well for OECD? Nicole, I'm not sure in terms of what your question was referring to. Is that just the reporting of the audits? A process audit. Okay, no, under OECD and FDA, EPA, everybody requires QA to be auditing that final report. So you can't just pick and choose if you're going to look at a report. No, you do need to look at the report. It's just the in life phase, I guess. I may be using old terms. They're not formally regulatory terms, but yeah. So the going to see formulation prep or dosing or whatever, the actual conduct of the actual bench work, animal work, that may or may not necessarily need a study specific audit, but absolutely data is verified and report is audited. There's strictly speaking, there's no specific requirement under any of the regulations that the data be audited, but we're auditing the report to confirm that the data, we're auditing the report and need to make sure that it's accurately reflects the data. So how do you do that without auditing the data? And QA is responsible under FDA for any deviations that are not observed. So QA is responsible to alert of any deviations. All right. Lydia, if you want to post a third one, but at this point, if there's any additional comments, if people want to certainly unmute or ask questions sort of this nature or throw up any responses or anything, please don't be shy. Again, these are just some questions to try and get some of you thinking, to get some sort of dialogue going. But this time essentially is your time. We're here for you. And panelists, feel free to chime in with your thoughts on any of these questions too. You're welcome to speak. It's not just the what do we call I don't even know what the term we're called, but whatever, I'm the moderator. Yeah,
Moderator.
thank you. I was like, what's it called? The moderator's not the only person who needs to speak, so feel free to jump in. And that goes for anybody on the, feel free to jump in with questions, comments, put your questions in the chat or unmute yourself and ask your question out loud.
Sherry, I have a question.
Yes.
So this OECD, I'm clearly not familiar with at all. So there are links though, correct, in SQA to get to this?
Absolutely. So if you're going to go to, so here again, we're on our SQA site, the RQAP. If you go to the examination study references, if you click on that, they have the different links. So this is for the EPA's advisory policy, advisory policies, EPA. There's a whole bunch. GLPs. So that's from FDA, the preambles. Preambles are super great because they're super helpful. The regulations, non-clinical, so more FDA. Principles of OECD. So your OECD is going to be there. And that's going to also have all of the various position, the OECD documents. So the OECD. Okay, am I not sharing? I see a comment. Can you please share on screen? Is my screen not sharing?
No, not yet.
Oh,
Not your fault, Sherry, just me jumping in, Lydia from headquarters. Sherry's sharing got interrupted when we shared the responses to the poll.
oh, sorry. Talking away. Thank you. Thank you for questioning it though. Usually I've been talking away and I'm like assuming y'all seeing this. Well, thank you for asking that. So yes, so I'll just backtrack one step. So from our SQA or RQAP site, if you scroll down, you've got your study references. If you click on that, it's all the stuff. We've got a whole bunch of EPA stuff. I'll scroll through, try not to make you dizzy. Then we've got our FDA stuff, and then we do have our OECD. Now I will go ahead and just quickly open the OECD one. So you will see that so first, document 1 is the principles or what most countries base their regulations on. So this is the law. And then it depends on the country whether the other consensus advisory working papers, etc., are actually law or not. But then it's got a whole bunch of them. So we're currently at, I think 25 is the last one. No, 25 is currently in discussion, I believe. So 24 is the last formal one. There's a lot of guidances. Some of the ones that you might want to focus in on that are potentially going to lead to more questions, because they're not going to pull an obsolete random question out of a advisory document that affects 0.01% of the industry, but roles and responsibilities of the study director, that's going to be in there. That's a good one to review. Role and the response, they don't cover the sponsor too much. Multi-site, guidance 13, absolutely. Application of OECD principles to the organization and management of multi-site. Multi-site, even though FDA doesn't address multi-site, you're doing it's pretty standard that throughout industry, there's a lot of multi-site studies out there. So that's definitely a good one to review. Computerized systems is a good one. And quality assurance and GLP. The other ones, I definitely recommend taking a read through, but I would expect that there wouldn't be massive amounts of questions on the other documents. Like outsourcing of inspection function by GLP compliance monitoring, or whether OC principles and ISO. Those type of things are not really going to cover in the quiz, because it's not really GLP application, right? Okay, so yeah, definitely take a read through those and you'll get a sense of stuff.
And this is just to say, I put this in the chat as well, but we had some kind of issue with the poll closing prematurely. So you're welcome to put your answer in the chat as well, if you think it may not have gotten captured by the poll. Looks like we have 9 out of 19 answers that are currently in the poll.
Yeah, if you want to share the answer, Lydia, and we'll dive into that. So what information should be included in the QA statement for an FDA regulated study?
All right, and I'm swapping up the
Yeah,
screen
okay.
share.
Now I realize it didn't even dawn on me.
There we go. Can everyone see the screen with the QA statement question and the answers?
No,
No,
sorry.
it's on my screen. I can stop sharing.
Okay, no worries. I set it to be multiple screens, so we'll go ahead.
All right, so audit performed, date of audits, date report to management, name and signature. Type of audit, date sent to study director, test site management, PI and test facility, unique study name, title as noted in the report, addressing if process or facility audits done. Date of study audits, audit type, date of findings submitted, person who performed audit. Dates of inspection, dates reported to PAI, TSM, TFM, and SD. Under which regulations the audit happened, audits and dates of audits, and dates the audits were sent to SD, TFM, NRPI, TSM. Audits conducted in statement of compliance or non-compliance. Phase inspected, inspection date, and date it was shared with SD and management. Dates of the audit, dates of reporting into whom, statement of data reflecting the study. Dates of inspection, the dates findings were reported to study director and management. Okay, some great responses. Now, I will tell you, the answer is dates inspections were made and findings reported to management and the study director, and that comes from 58.35B, part 7. So the direct reference in the FDA reg GLPs stipulates its dates inspections were made, findings reported to and findings reported to management and the study director. That's the requirement. So obviously, based on the responses, we all put more stuff in our QAS. Obviously, it's not just what it is, the dates inspection, that's it. But again, you're going based on what the regulations themselves say. So that's one of those things that don't necessarily go by what you specifically do, but more just in terms of what is the requirement from the regulations. And
Sherry, this is Deb. It's interesting when the QA statements back in when I used to write the QA statements, it was the dates of the inspection, okay? And then the date reported to the study director, not the actual findings. We never included our actual findings in a statement.
no, sorry, I may have.
No. This can be misinterpreted, not you. It's just, this can be misinterpreted. I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously compliance, non-compliance statement, but yeah, yeah, so thank you.
No,
This-
thank you for
that-
sharing that. Yeah, and I might have read that weirdly, but if you go to the reference for those of you who have your little
Mhm.
regs or your, so it's the 58.35
Yep.
B7, and then a QA statement. Prepare and sign a statement to be included with the final study report, which shall specify the dates inspections were made and findings reported to management and to the study director. So it's a
Yeah.
very minimal requirement. Obviously, we know they're looking for what the audit was. Obviously, that's kind of expected, even though it's not strictly stipulated in the regulation. But again, that's the focus. Both of those requirements are dates. Yes, absolutely. No, the area, it not strictly speaking, it's expected, but it doesn't actually state about the QAS.
Yeah. Mm.
Unless there's more, perhaps, let me just check. It may be in the other part in terms of the actual reporting. Oh, no, it just says end of the reporting requirements. It just says the statement prepared and signed by the quality assurance unit as described in 5835B7. So
Right.
the areas of inspection, it's not strictly stated in the GLPs. We all know that they need to know what the inspection was. Obviously, we can't just slap a whole bunch of dates on and that doesn't mean anything, right? We need to say, you know, we audited the protocol in those dates and we did a dosing
Correct.
inspection in those dates. Absolutely. So those are, so it's one of those things that you know it's there, but the regulations go by exactly with the regulations. You know,
Right, yeah.
think
Yeah.
of the quiz as like you're talking to someone who's very like, well, that's exactly what it said, so that's exactly what I have to do. Usually most people know someone who's very much like that, and yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, if the answer, one of the options said the type of inspections with dates reported, the type of audit, when it was conducted and when it was reported to study director and TFM, then yes, that would be your primary choice. But if it starts going and, you know, your titles and your claim of compliance and all that stuff, strictly speaking, it's not driven. It doesn't mean that it's wrong if it's there. So those of you who are doing it at your site, don't go like, oh my God, we're wrong. We're not following the regs. We all know that there's stuff sometimes that we have to augment than what's in the regulations. All right, Lydia, I want to launch the fourth question, please.
And Sherry, we currently have nothing shared on the screen if you'd like to put up the poll question or
Oh,
anything like that.
Yeah, I was just moving. I've got a lot of things going, a lot of screens open myself. So I'm like, let's move it to the next slide, which is another screen to. There we go. So what are the key components needed for training records for staff working on GLP studies?
There's a logistical question in the chat here. I again jumping in as a headquarters representative, I'm happy to. I can't talk about the content of the exam or anything like that, but I can answer logistical questions. And someone wanted to know, can you share any intro on the testing centers and registration process? Is it too late to apply for the next test? It is not too late to apply for the upcoming exam period. The late deadline is going to be next Monday, the 24th of February. And the exam period itself, let me just quickly review those dates, are going to be from the 24th of March to the 26th of April. If you have taken the exam previously, or if you've been approved to take the exam previously, you'll be automatically reapproved and registered for the exam. If this is your first time, you'll need to provide a CV, and that will be reviewed by the Council on Professional Registration to confirm that you meet the requirements for eligibility. Once you've been approved, you'll be able to schedule your exam appointment. Even before you're approved, you can go to the Pearson View site, the SQA page, and go through a simulation of the scheduling process. And I'll go ahead and quickly put a link to that in the chat here. That the study quality assurance certification testing with Pearson View. You'll go through a simulation of the process there, and it will show you what is currently available. Pearson View is our testing partner, and it's not as if their sites are reserved for our exclusive use. So an appointment that's available now may be taken by someone else in the meantime. So you should ideally have a first choice for appointment and a backup if that first choice doesn't work out. And someone else asked, when will we get approval? All approvals should come through by mid-March at the latest. If you applied earlier, most likely you'll hear back earlier than mid-March, but there are various factors, such as the fact that our Council on Professional Registration members are volunteers who have things happening in their own life, that can determine the timeline of your approval, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your application itself. And I apologize, Sherry, I'll turn it back over to you if you want me to end the poll and share it, or how you'd like
please
to
do.
move on.
Yeah, no, please end the poll and share that. All right, so what are some of the key components needed for training records for staff working on GLP studies?
Can everyone see the answers?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, okay, there it is. Sorry. It's really hard with like 10,000 screens. All right, so proficiency training, CV, job description, GLP training, document evidence of GLP training and on supporting SOPs procedures, job description, CV, documentation required trainings, study specific tasks, GLP regs, GLP training, job description, resume, GLP data and integrity training, GLP certificates, reading SOPs for regs, job description, CV, and any other GLP training for regulations, CV, job description, date of training, content, trainee name, title of training, date of training, how training was performed, CV, job description, role-based training and study-based training, job description, summary. Yeah. Sorry, I want to keep it. You all can see that. Those are some great answers. Absolutely. I think amongst all of them, you've covered everything. So CV, so we need our curriculum vitae, so like your resume, your job description, you need education, training, and or experience for personnel engaged in or supervising the conduct of the study and GLP training. And that comes from 58.29A and B of the FDA GLPs, and it's in the EPAs as well. And it's also part of OECD Part 2, 1, 2, B, C. B and C, sorry, B and C. So same requirements are in there for both FDA and OECD. So it's pretty straightforward. So that way, you know, you can support that people who are working on GLP studies have the requirements. All right, let's move into the last question that I've prepared. And then again, if anyone has any other questions that they want to ask, please don't be shy. So the last question, what information should be included in the master schedule for an FDA study as a minimum? Now, all these questions came directly just pulling out information from the FDA GLPs and the OECDs. I didn't specifically cover the EPA stuff. I don't have it as readily available. But the interesting thing with the FDAs and the EPAs, FDA is a 58 part, or is part 58. EPAs have very similar, and usually the numbering after 58 is pretty similar to the EPA ones. So if it's like, if I say 58.3.5, if you go to the EPA regulation, there's 2 of them, and you go to the section 3.5, it's going to be covered there. So the regulations are there. All right, we'll give them one more minute, Lydia, and then we'll close the poll just because we're close to the end of the hour. And again, feel free to raise any questions, put it in the chat, raise your hand, whether it's content, whether it's, you know, expectations in terms of, you know, what to consider, what to do, or suggestions. Hopefully many of you attended. There was a session last week that Melanie held in terms of sort of the science and taking tests and what type of person you may be, and how to prepare for that, and how that impacts how you may study for the test or take the test itself. So if you haven't seen that, I believe that was recorded and posted, in which case I do recommend you taking a listen to that, because that's certainly helpful and might give you some pointers on how to best prepare for this, because I'm sure many of you, it may have been a while since you've been in school and having to take tests. So it is a new experience when you're doing it as an adult, like an adult who's been working in industry for a while. All right, Lydia, if you want to go ahead and share the results. Stop share. All right, so test article, test system, nature, study progress. Organized by test article, name of sponsor, name of test sites, name of study director and PI, study initiation, and status, nature of study, test article, test system, nature of study, date study was initiated, current status, identity of sponsor, name of study director, date study was initiated, current status, study number, study title, study type. Absolutely. So some really great answers. Now, strictly speaking from, yes, Diana, actually the PowerPoint itself will be posted in the study group on SQA Connect. So you should be able to access all that information there. And it is in the notes. My PowerPoint will be, I'll send it to Lydia, who will post it. I didn't want to post it in advance because it's kind of cheating if I give you guys the answers before we actually get to it. But so test article, test system, nature of study, date study was initiated, current status of each study, identity of the sponsor, and name of the study director. It should be indexed by test article, and that comes from 58.35B1. I can actually put that in there. All right, so yeah. So so that's strictly coming from the regulations. And again, there were some wonderful answers and additional items in there that, again, they're not wrong. But when you're taking an exam, think specifically what did the regulations? And that's why sometimes you will have to separate a little bit out of what your standard practice is versus what the regulations, because quite often you won't necessarily see exactly what's in what you do, and you're gonna be like, oh my God, that's wrong. It's not wrong. We're not here to tell you what you're doing at your site is wrong. We're just saying that the regulations are very, very specific, and obviously, as you know, and especially going with the FDA regulations, they haven't been updated since, well, since I was a wee little girl. So that's been quite a number of years. So we all know they're due for updating. So so you know, we know industry's evolved and requirements and expectations have certainly evolved. But yeah. So we're basically at the end of the hour. I don't know if anyone has any other questions or anything you'd like to feedback on. If so, this is kind of how we're going to try and run the sessions. Like I said, at the beginning, we will cut the, you know, talking about the exam and the helpful hints. That still will be in the presentation. You can read through that, but we will take more time just for the questions. We do challenge you, if you're coming to the study group, come with your own questions as well. Or, you know, whether they be questions specifically on regulatory content, or, well, what's the best way, or how are people studying for this, or how much of this are you getting into? Any type of questions you may have, we're here to support. The more that you guys respond and feedback and ask your questions, the more you're going to get it. This is a study group. It's not a training. You shouldn't be walking out of here going, okay, that was great. So, and the more you feedback going, oh, we'd like to see more of this. We've got 4 more sessions to go. So we can tweak them as we go and make sure that we're meeting your needs, because these sessions are for you guys. So thank you all for those of you who attended, and I can stay on for an extra few minutes if there's anybody who has any other questions or stuff. And thank you to our panelists as well, Brendan and Deb. Thank you so much for being on.
Well, I'm learning as well, refreshing, particularly OECD, refreshing my memory. Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great discussion. Thank you, everybody.